Do we have all the remote participation?
No, we have to.
Is
we have
Bob
to
the only one on right now?
I'm on.
Joe's on.
Joe's on.
Okay.
It's Joe.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to call the meeting to order. And we have 4 council people here, and then we have, we'd like to consider allowing remote participation for 2 people. So,
So you have to vote.
so moved?
So moved.
Okay. All right.
And then all in favor? You got to go
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're
right.
good.
And so I'll call the Marvin Planning Board meeting on February 16th, 2026 to order. We are missing Ken and Rich. Anyone else? I think we're good. Okay. We don't have any remote participation, so we'll move to adoption of the agenda. So if I could get a motion from our side to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
And all in favor? All right, so moved.
And then I need a motion from our side to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
And adoption of our previous minutes, so anyone have any changes, comments, questions, burning desires? All right, so if I could get a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
All in favor? All right. And do we have anyone for public comment? I do see that we have some scouts. Yeah. Okay, well, welcome, you guys. Welcome, thanks for being here. I guess you're just viewing the public process, the government process. So we'll now call the joint meeting to session. We don't have to do any approvals here, correct? No. Since we've already opened, okay. All right, so we'll start with F1, so the comprehensive plan discussion.
All right, all of you guys have probably heard me say the comp plan, and I know a few guys are, few of the council as well as the planning board are volunteering for our working group. So Kimley Horn is our consultant here tonight to kind of go over the kind of high overview again of what a comprehensive plan includes, as well as where we're at in the current project, and to also kind of get some feedback and guidance from both the council and the planning board tonight. We will be having our open house community meeting tomorrow. Originally, we wanted to have that prior to this meeting and go over some of that. However, due to the first ice and snow event and then the second one, we've had to reschedule. We finally got a date tomorrow, and as far as I know, there's no snow in the radar for tomorrow. So that will still be here tomorrow at Village Hall from 4:30 to 6:30. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Yep, thanks. Good to be with you all. Good to see some familiar faces. Haven't been here at the council retreat not too long ago. So those of you who don't know me, I am Jonathan Whitehurst with Kimley Horn in our Charlotte office, and pleased to be here helping with this process. Cameron?
My name is Cameron Hagler. I'm also here with Kimley Horn to help out Jonathan.
And so with apologies for you on council who saw some of these slides previously not too long ago, I did want to just kind of remind you all of kind of the process and what we're trying to achieve. This particular comprehensive plan is updating the plan that was adopted a few years back. I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to support the mission and the vision that council is currently kind of refining. We want to kind of take that and support it with a preferred approach to land use, and then wrap a series of action items around that, not dissimilar to kind of the strategic plan that you all have created or continue to review. We're just kind of thinking a little bit longer term than a typical strategic plan. I do want to point out that it's our hope with this particular document to structure it in a way that staff, planning board, village council can kind of continue to revisit it and kind of make updates as needed, and also to kind of find the right point where we're providing flexibility in the document itself, because there's certain things that we just can't anticipate at this point, but hopefully there's structure there so that you all can evaluate it again within the context of the vision and mission that you all had set forth. While we are doing the comprehensive plan, there are some things that we're taking a look at in a little bit more detail. So there will be an update to your Parks and Greenway Master Plan. We're going to provide some guidance on annexation and also take another look at the Heritage District Master Plan. When we think about the comprehensive plan, the planning process, as Hunter mentioned, we are looking for community input throughout this process. And so we're going to start with the vision and guiding principles. Again, those are the mission, vision, and goals that are kind of already in place, and we're just kind of testing those through our public process. And then we'll kind of quickly move into developing the plan and creating the report itself. I say quickly because it is a compact schedule, and so we sit before you here in middle of February. We're looking to be back in front of Planning Board and Village Council in the summer timeframe for adoption. And so, like I said, it's a relatively quick process. I think the good thing is that there's a lot of good planning that has come before, and we're just making sure that we kind of reference that, make sure that it's still relevant and that we're kind of continuing the right path as we go forward. So the community characteristics is really the first piece of the overall plan. And so here's where we're, again, looking at those existing plans and then taking a deeper dive into the available data as it relates to demographic trends or kind of the existing land use framework for the village, and then also the natural and built environment. The draft of this has been sent to staff, and ultimately it'll form kind of the first third or so of the overall document. When we think about some of the community characteristics, certainly we want to take a look at growth trends. And when we had our working group meeting last week, there was a good discussion about kind of what these numbers mean. And I think that what you see in the gray box there is making sure that with the document that we're placing the growth trends in the context of the region as well as the village's vision. And so when we think about the population projections that you see there, we're going to be careful to characterize this within the document as that's not necessarily a target, but that's kind of the projections that exist today. The way that we developed those projections included both like a more aggressive growth projection and this more conservative that you see in the bar chart there, or the line chart. I think at the end of the day, what we recognize is that Union County is going to continue to grow, and you all are going to continue to experience the growth pressures kind of all around you. And I think part of this plan is to make sure that there's a very clear understanding of how the village wants to respond to those external pressures. When we think about the community characteristics as it relates to some of the housing trends, it's no surprise that the housing stock here is relatively new, definitely high value, and certainly single family focused. And I think as we look at the future land use map going forward, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is recognize the unique characteristics of the homes and neighborhoods that make up Marvin, and we'll talk about that a little bit more during the discussion. One of the interesting things that we talked about with our working group last week too was how do you frame that growth projection in the context of this map that you see here, which is that a large percentage of the land in Marvin is already developed as residential properties or residential neighborhoods. And, you know, we had even talked in that meeting that 13.3% undeveloped is actually a little bit lower now just because of recent changes. And so what the working group asked us to do was to kind of think more about what is the build-out potential for the village kind of under current codes and regulations, and that's something that we'll also do. I think the other thing that we've heard loud and clear with this process is even if property is showing up on this map as developed, that doesn't mean that it's not susceptible to change or under the threat of change. And so how do we kind of characterize that in the overall document? I'll pause there. I've got some questions at the end, but I didn't know if there were any initial questions about kind of what you've seen on those previous slides.
I just had one question. A couple slides back, you had a projection of, I think it was 9,200, population of 9,200 in 25 years. Is that based on building out within the existing environs and existing boundaries of Marvin, or does that also take into account particular or possible annexation?
This is just within the village, and I think that's why when it was presented to the working group, they have the question that I think you're wondering is how that's even possible, given the limited amount of land that's
Yeah, that's what I was
available.
asking. So this is just based on land that is currently in Marvin now?
Yes,
Thank you.
that's right.
And-
Yep.
And if I can add in, part of their scope includes a study area, which the study area does include like our annexation boundary. I know we briefly talked about this at the working group, but in their original heuristic support or report that they sent to me, they had those trends as well. And so it's kind of what they've done is, like I said, based off of what we currently have, but obviously there is that chance for future annexations of already developed properties and/or undeveloped that could be developed, which will also impact that growth rate as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So even here on this slide, you can see that we're showing the growth rate from 2010 to 2025 for the village. Then you see it for the larger study area, and then for the county as a whole. These, of course, are percentages. So any growth that occurred in Marvin since 2010, that percentage is going to be very high because the absolute number was starting off much lower. And then we're going to continue to, in the document, we continue to make a distinction between the village limits, the larger study area that Hunter mentioned, and then the comparison to the county as a whole.
And last thing, the other reason, once again, from that study area standpoint, it's not necessarily that we're looking to annex. It's, once again, it's taking those projections in so we can plan from the village's standpoint for the growth and those factors outside of our control we're gonna reap negative benefits if it's traffic or other impacts.
Yeah, and so the future land use map will set expectations for those annexation areas, even if the village can't involuntarily annex those properties. So I wanted to mention, again, the path that we're going to take. So the vision, the mission and vision and goals, which I have on the following slide, are narrative or words or phrases that you all have already taken a look at a few weeks ago. It's not our intent with this process to compete or to create a competing vision. We want to make sure that we kind of respect the work that the village continues to do as it kind of states kind of its mission and vision going forward, as well as the 4 goals that you all kind of have in your strategic plan. I do think, though, that there's an opportunity with this process to kind of support the mission, vision, and goals with additional action items. Some of those will be pulled directly from the strategic plan, and then in some cases, we might expand it as we look a little bit further out into the future. And so, again, the mission statement, the vision statement, and then we have those 4 goals. It was interesting in the working group kind of talking about these 4 goals and kind of where there's a lack of specificity that the plan might benefit from a little bit more detail. But I think at the end of the day, we're kind of moving in the right direction if we lean into these 4 goals. We'll create the land use strategy. That's our way of illustrating the preferred characteristics as it relates to land uses and urban design or just design in general. And then once we have that land use strategy, again, we'll wrap the policy framework around that. And that's where we're going to touch on all the topics that you see there that can't necessarily be communicated in the map itself. From a documentation standpoint, you are going to get a comprehensive plan report. There'll be a separate Parks and Greenway master plan, And then all of the technical details and the engagement summaries will be provided under separate cover. Your current comprehensive plan is not laborious to read, and I think that it'll be our goal to also kind of keep this document simple and concise as much as possible. I'm not going into it in a lot of detail today, but I did want you all to know that we are doing the Parks and Greenway Master Plan update. And, you know, there's a blended process where we're using the same working group for both of those efforts. If you're not aware, the working group does include members of Planning Board and Village Council, so thanks for you all who are serving in that capacity. We also have, you know, representatives from the Parks and Greenway Board as well. And so that process is really leaning into your current Parks and Greenway Master Plan, but making sure that it is reflective of the current trends and changes and the reflections that we received with your most recent community survey. As it relates to community engagement, there's a variety of ways that we will collect input. As you all know, there is the project website. There's some digital engagement that is ongoing with that. We're pleased with the responses that we're continuing to get on the digital sticky note board, and I'll share some of those on the next slide. There's these kind of joint meetings, work sessions. Again, we're speaking with the Parks Rec Greenway Board. We'll be meeting with them at their meeting in April. As Hunter mentioned, we have the community workshop here tomorrow night. We're going to have another community workshop later in the process. We're really kind of taking a deep dive into the 2025 survey results that were just released last month. And then, of course, we'll be back in front of you all for adoption. So I think even though the process itself is relatively compressed, you know, it's our goal to provide, you know, different ways for people to engage in the process. So we do have the digital sticky note activity that is on the project website, and I know there's been discussion about that particular activity. I will say that over the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've gotten a lot of great helpful participation with that. Our plan tomorrow is to show some of these results and then also continue to collect this type of input. But I think if you look at the board there, it's probably not a big surprise as to what is top of mind. Again, there was probably, I think, you know, 100 submissions on this, so you're just seeing kind of a fraction of what we've received online. There's a lot of talks about greenways, about the challenges related to traffic and transportation. Parks and recreation is, of course, something that is frequently mentioned. And so I think those topics will continue to kind of percolate throughout the overall plan. Just one more slide, and then I'll start to ask you all some questions. You've been very patient. I did want to mention the community workshop in here tomorrow. The way that that's going to be structured, it's an interactive open house, so we advertised it for a 2-hour block, but people can come anytime that they want to during that 2 hours. They can spend 10 minutes with us and we'll get some information out of them, or if they want to spend the entire 2 hours, they can certainly do that, and I'm sure you know, some folks will take us up on the offer to be here the entire time, which is fine. The way that it'll be set up, there'll be a variety of activity stations so people can kind of bounce around the room. When they sign in, we'll ask them where do they live, work, recreate. That's just kind of our way, one, to get them engaged with a map and to get them comfortable with posting stuff. So definitely not anything scientific with that. We are going to present the mission and vision and ask people to reflect on those, open-ended with sticky notes. And then for each of those 4 goals, we've got a board, and we're going to ask people 2 simple questions. How important is this particular goal? And how well is the village doing to achieve that goal right now? And so that often yields an interesting data point where you can kind of see like where where the things are that are most important and how well we're doing in achieving that.
Can I ask a
a
quick
lot of
question?
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but just to clarify, the goals that are in this presentation, they are new goals, or they are goals that were set? Like, how new are they? Because it's like
Yep,
you're
so
comparing-
they're from the most recent strategic plan that Village Council adopted, and then the wording, I think, was refined at the at the retreat last month.
Okay, so new goals, but not a lot of time to have made a ton of progress towards them, so,
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think, though, that there's like just reading those 4 goals, and I can go back to it real quick, so you can kind of see them.
bless you.
Yeah.
So here are those 4 goals, and while it's true that they're not, that they're relatively new, I do think that kind of in reading those, the public and the people that come through the door can provide, some guidance about how well is the village preserving that small town atmosphere and the identity there. The other thing, though, that we want people to do is to tell us more than just a dot on the board, right? So why did they answer that way? And so there'll be an opportunity for the open-ended feedback there as well. If the feedback that we receive through this process, we'll present it to you all. And if that prompts you to take another look at it in real time as you all are evaluating these goals, or you're wise in that you look at these every year during your retreat, and so it's at least one more data point for you to consider when the calendar flips over.
May I make a suggestion, and obviously you don't have to take it, but I know this came up in our working group last week. But even asking them, what does small town atmosphere mean to them?
Yeah.
Because that's a qualitative, so I was struggling with that, like, what does that mean? Like, it
Yeah.
needs to be more defined, but if we ask the people who show up, what does that mean to them? It'll get we'll have more opinions to put in the melting pot, so.
Well, and not to get too far ahead of myself, but one of the questions that I was going to pose to you all was, how do you think people will respond to that very question? And then we can kind of compare and see how close you got it, or kind of take another look at it once we hear from the public. Right. So yeah, I'll just jumping back into kind of the way that the workshop is structured. The 3 topics that you see there: future land use, transportation and trails, and parks and recreation. For future land use and transportation and trails, we've got 2 activities. One of the things that we noticed in your community survey is it provides a lot of good input, but it doesn't go into a lot of detail specific to land use. And so the ask here is pretty simple. We're providing a list of different types of land uses, and we're asking people, where are these land uses most appropriate? Is it kind of in the village, on the edge of the village, or please somewhere else but not the village? And that answer is okay too, and it's helpful for us to hear that. The mapping activity for the future land use and the transportation will be just a large base map of the overall study area, and people can provide written comments with numbered dots. We also know that the topic, the concept of greenways and trails brings strong emotions, both for and against, right? And so one of the things that we're asking at the workshop is to tell us what excites you about that, and to tell us what concerns you. And we're asking people to answer those questions not on a map, just generally speaking, like what concerns you? When you say that I don't want greenways and trails, what concerns you? Or when you say, by all means, we need more greenways and trails, like what is it about that statement that kind of prompts you to say that? And then the last one is parks and recreation, and so there we're talking about areas to be protected and what types of activities the community wants more of. I do know that as it relates to Parks and Recreation and the master plan update, one of the push-pulls that we're seeing is, differing desires for more amenities or more programs, and certainly the question that comes with that as it relates to how does that get funded. And so that'll be something that we're thinking about going forward. Any questions about that before I pepper you with a couple of questions?
Quick one. It's always me. How many people are you going to have at this, like for the verbal surveying? Are you bringing a big team out? Is the staff like helping? Like, do you need volunteers? Like, it's a lot of data gathering.
Yep, and so tomorrow there'll be 3 of us from Kimley Horn at the meeting, and then we'll be supported by staff. The way though that it's structured, we can typically manage a good crowd with fewer people, because the activities are typically self-directed. It's the people that want to talk to somebody face-to-face that we'll need to make sure that we're available to chat with them.
Okay, thanks.
But if any of you all want to come and jump into the conversation, we welcome it. But we're not expecting it. So I think you used a different term as like what that small town atmosphere. When we reflected on kind of what we heard at the first 2 working group meetings, kind of this question of what does it mean to preserve, and the phrase here is what makes Marvin, Marvin, and where are we willing or not willing to accept change. And I don't know, the intent here isn't necessarily to kind of put you all on the spot or necessarily to put you on the record, but I do think that it's helpful for us to think kind of in those terms of like what is it about Marvin that makes Marvin Marvin? Can I open that up and see what what answers you might have to that?
For me, not overdeveloped. I love to see the horse farms and the rolling hills, and it's just peaceful and tranquil and a great place to raise your family because it's not overbuilt.
Okay.
Kind of
Yeah,
second that.
sorry.
You go and I'll go. So I'm from Brooklyn, and there's this neighborhood, Ditmas Park. It was really, really, really old homes. And all of New York City and all of Brooklyn changed around it and became modern Brooklyn, right? But through a whole bunch of just weird things, this was frozen in time to like this late 1800s, right? Where there's just all these Victorian homes and just weird kind of streets that were common back then, but were replaced by modern, what we all know a city to look like, right? And there's just something magical and special about that. So I totally agree with Angel, and I get that the world is changing and the world is modernizing and everyone's developing and everyone's doing those things, but if we can pause Marvin's path down that road, right, everything will change around it and Marvin will kind of stay in Marvin and be this really cool place where there's still horse farms and there's still big lots.
Well, the word that comes to mind for me is sanctuary. If I look at 521 corridor in Lancaster, and if I look at Stallings, if I look at Waxhaw, the development is overwhelming. And we have the opportunity, in my opinion, to create an environment, maintain an environment that's truly special in Union County. And like I said, the word that really comes to mind is sanctuary.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to second and third what I've just heard. Marvin is kind of like the meat between the 2 pieces of bread. We're being, squeezed, and we want to keep our identity with larger lots, kind of a rural feel, still a wonderful place to raise kids. Hold on to the history we have with the equine here in the beautiful rolling hills that we have with very cautious development when it comes to anything that is commercial and even residential.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, I've been here for a long time, and current Marvin has zero comparison to what it was 40-plus years ago. And, you know, that's been long gone since the beginning of, once Firethorn started. Yep. Yep, that was the first new development in Marvin. Otherwise, it was existing homes, basically. And so it's hard, and, you know, you can't go back there. And, you know, we say it's great the way it is now. Well, it's not the way it used to be.
So let me ask you this, when you think about like the village now, how many different types of residential uses or types of residential land uses are there? Not thinking about zoning, but like there's large master plan neighborhoods. There's, for lack of a better term, the legacy homes that were here, you know, 40 years ago and have survived. How would you describe the different types of residential areas in Marvin?
You have custom homes.
Okay.
Very few. I think even John, your neighborhood is in the neighborhood. You know, there's very few non-neighborhoods here. I mean, we're a neighborhood community. And, you know, that's what we've become, like it or not, and that's what we will continue to be. I don't think there's any opportunity to build a farm. You know, we're not going back. We have to look forward.
Land's too expensive to
Yeah.
be
I mean,
agriculture.
We
unless
have
you're-
we have to realize what John said, what we were and what we are. And what we are is a neighborhood community.
But I will say, preserving the rural that we still have, especially the rural residential. Y'all know I will die on this freaking mound. Like, that's really important because I think when I hear you guys talk about larger lot sizes, it's the rural residential communities that still make Marvin. Like, our neighborhood, we still have horse farms. Many of our neighbors have horses. We have restricted deeds that don't allow subdividing. So, but protecting those, but our deeds and things were written in like the 80s, so they're gonna start being challenged, and preserving them and preserving the land uses around them so that there is transitional density between a 4-acre lot with one home. I mean, some of these are, our neighborhood, half our neighborhood looks like it's underdeveloped. They're all developed, all the land is developed, but it states it's underdeveloped. It is what it is. So just preserving that is important, and that also includes tree canopy and giving that more, and not just tree canopy preservation with buffers. I know we're going to talk about this in a second, but we moved to Marvin because the smaller school size, because we were in CMS. My kindergartners had 12 kindergarten classes, and we were like, nope. So moved here. We wanted land. We wanted, smaller size schools, and we didn't want to see our neighbors like through the trees. We didn't want to see our neighbors through the trees. We don't have a problem with our neighbors, but and we don't really have that anymore. So the way Marvin, and that was 12 years ago. We haven't been here that long, and I work in Mecklenburg County, and I'm from Charlotte originally, and Marvin is a haven and an escape, and it still is, but it's starting to definitely lose that.
I'm going to zoom out real quick before I go to the next slide and talk about the community workshop. I mentioned that the plan is to be back in front of planning board and council in just a few months, honestly, in that July timeframe. When I'm standing there kind of presenting this plan, what is it that you hope is in the plan? Like, is there a few things off the top of your head that you hope is reflected in the plan? And if I talk about it, you'll smile? I mean, we've touched on a few of them, just kind of rural preservation, kind of capturing the concept of Marvin and preserving it, even against the threat of development that's occurring all around you. But are there other things? And if not, that's fine too. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to say, please think about this as you're writing the plan.
I don't know if it fits or not, but preservation of tree canopy.
I will say that, and I should have mentioned this a second ago, but, and Mike did touch on this. We now, with annexation, we now have, neighborhoods that don't fit the typical 1 acre per home in Marvin. It's, what are we, residential, what, is it 1, 3? What's the smaller,
It'd be, I mean, it would be, if you're referring to zoning, it would be probably some of the subdivisions that are zoned SFR3.
R3,
And that's just
yeah.
because they were done through the county, through the conservation subdivision, so it's smaller lots, different density yield,
And
so.
I do think there is, so first of all, every neighborhood, no matter what your lot size is, should be welcome, feel like they are a part of the community, and even if they don't have a 1 acre lot size, they're somehow, their voice doesn't count. But also seeing annexation as an opportunity to get some more density without increasing density in like Marvin proper, like the original boundaries of Marvin. Everyone has poo-pooed townhouses, but in some of the commercial areas, I don't see why townhouses couldn't be an option, for, not that anyone over 50 really wants to do 3 stories, like that's pretty rough, but I do think annexation is a potential way for us to provide some of the housing that is people really aren't interested in, in the original boundaries of Marvin, but could be in some of those outer areas along Ray and Providence, and maybe not Ray, but Providence.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be both and.
So I'll close with this. Sorry. Yay.
We all know this is a sensitive subject matter, but one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we incorporate is how do we not, where we want to preserve Marvin, we want to say rural residential, there's a lot of people that have moved into Marvin that have never been this far down. They don't see the charm that we see because we live more in what we call proper Marvin than some of the annexations and that. How do we inundate them and to understand what we're feeling and what we're doing as we continue to expand Marvin and grow Marvin, because we're painting a picture for them that a lot of them have, what, a 5-block radius between their school, and then they go maybe to Charlotte for work. So they don't understand the charm. They've probably never been down Waxhaw Marvin, where you live. They have no purpose unless they're going to Old Town, down to Main Street. So that's important to educate some of the more dense areas of Marvin. Some of those people haven't been down there, to maybe put something, a campaign together for them to explore why Marvin is the way it is and why we feel the way we feel about Marvin, because they don't. They just stay in their subdivision and go to the grocery store and see signs, and that's it.
Well, and you can even see in the results of the 25, or the most recent community survey, kind of folks hinting at the desire for that. And, that kind of comes through in a variety of different ways, like the programs, like having a farmer's market in Marvin, or continue to invest in the events through Parks and Rec that kind of draw people so that they know that there is a community in Marvin. It's not just a collection of neighborhoods. And I think, like, as an outsider, it seems like the biggest challenge, especially for some of these large neighborhoods, is the community that exists. It's the community of that neighborhood. And then how do you kind of create kind of those physical, those emotional, those social connections between neighborhoods is something I certainly think we can explore as part of this plan.
You touched on something I was getting ready to say, is 40 years ago, go back to that, we were really spread out. And the community, I guess, if you will call it that, was the two churches. That's where everybody, would meet and congregate and, talk to, quote, neighbors, et cetera. And today, you've got these large developments, whether Marvin Creek or Firethorn or all these other, and basically all the people know are the people who live in that neighborhood. There's no reason, there's nothing to bring them out to meet someone who lives, you live in Firethorn, how do you meet someone who lives, down here off, Waxhaw Marvin Road? There's nothing to pull the people out to a common place. And,
Especially when you don't work here.
Correct.
well, there's not a
Or you
work,
work out of your home.
there's not a work really in Marvin other than, there's not. But, and that was, I think, one, as far as I was concerned, and we haven't really discussed it, but the Heritage District, and in my opinion, that was one of the primary goals, is to give all of the residents of Marvin someplace to come and become a community. As I said, I'm tired of going to Blakeney and sitting at the bar drinking a beer beside someone who lives over in who knows where. I want to sit at the bar and drink a beer beside someone who lives in Marvin. I drink a lot of beer.
Good feedback. There's also this question, like when we're in the room tomorrow, and hopefully we're not violating the fire code, but we've got a lot of people that want to come and chat with us. What do you want our team to be prepared to listen for during that meeting? Or what do you think we're going to hear?
I think what John said, there has to be a meeting place. And I think what he said, the Heritage District is supposed to be that meeting place. And, because, those churches, now everybody goes to churches all across the city. The Catholic churches, Presbyterian churches, those churches. It's no longer the meeting place there. So the Heritage District, when we worked on that, that was our goal, was to create a meeting place.
Well, there is one church in Marvin still. Banks Presbyterian is still one in, I think it's the only one in Marvin now. Well, the Weddington Methodist, yeah. Yeah.
I think we also need to think about what we're not going to hear.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example, and I think someone mentioned it earlier, and it's important because it's one of the reasons I'm here. And I come from a big city, and I did not realize it till I moved here, is the tree preservation. So when you go into some of the newer subdivisions, those saplings are going to take 30 years to grow. Where I'm on, 5 acres where I have very mature trees, and I've learned about the trees and the importance of the trees. You're not going to hear that for some people. Now you have like Firethorn, Marvin Creek, those are some of those mature, Weddington Chase. But those types of things, if we go back to our core goals and things that were important for us, tree canopy was important, greenways, trailways, we're not going to hear that from a lot of the people that have moved here from some of more of the metropolis areas or into the newer subdivisions that didn't even have trees, So for old
Didn't know it was
farmland.
even an option.
No, they didn't know it was an option. They didn't know that. So those are some of the things we need to worry about. What are we not hearing from the people that don't understand the charm of Marvin?
Right. And
We've talked about it in the planning board, if I may. We've talked about it in the planning board, and we went back, and Firethorn keeps getting brought up here, but Firethorn did it right. When Firethorn was developed, you were sold a lot that was a forest. There was no tree cutting. I mean, you look at the development over here, it's completely gone. All the trees are gone. Every lot on Firethorn was sold as a forest, and you hand-picked the trees that you cut down. And we've talked about trying to
They were
make.
all custom homes, right? Were they all custom
They're all
homes?
custom homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between like a Firethorn and a
Well,
Jones,
I mean,
but I
but
agree
the
with
thing
you.
is, if
I'm
you
more
want
just
tree
saying-
preservation, you have to
have to
look
do it a
at
different
how
way.
hard it's gonna be.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have it both ways. You say, I want tree preservation, but I'm gonna allow everybody to cut down a tree. You have to make some hard decisions. When we want to have a residential development, sell it with the trees on it. It can be done. It was done. Firethorn's a very successful neighborhood, and we did it the right way.
But, you know, you ride around, and difference in Firethorn and Marvin Creek, you know, everybody says, where's the trees? Where there were no trees.
It was a field,
That was
yeah.
Joe Carr's farmland. And that's the reason there were no trees.
But I think to the point, this is where you plan for it.
Yeah.
If you don't know, you're not gonna ask for it. You know, when you come from a metropolis area, so like I came from Los Angeles, I didn't see a palm tree, but New York, it's
Those
concrete
fall
jungle.
down, yeah.
So you don't appreciate or have the wherewithal to even ask for that when you're moving into a new subdivision that may have been formerly farmland. Okay, well, the developer should be bringing in those trees, and it should be factored in the process, and we've talked about it many times.
We have.
Well, one of the things, Michael, I totally agree with you, by the way. But one of the things I know Hunter's working on is strengthening the tree ordinance so that the quality of the tree that the developer puts in is a better quality than what's been put in the past.
Oh, it's a very disgusting plan.
It is.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
also the amount of trees. Some of the developers in Marvin, and we all know, and I hate picking a neighborhood, but Marvin Creek's very close to us. The developer put several trees in the front yard, but everything's out of the backyard. There are no trees.
Right.
It's just vacant. And I think part of our responsibility is the education for the residents of Marvin. And I know Hunter's working on that through the ordinances, and but I share your concerns, and there's got to be a better way to go to do business. There really has to be.
That circles back if you don't know, I asked that question tomorrow.
Right.
And what are the penalties for people who don't
So
stick to
I
that?
just want to, something I've been jotted down over here because this is very good discussion and it made me think. I mean, and I don't know if we want to like do this real quick or what, but like the question that I kind of want to ask is, why did you move to Marvin? Like what, and potentially select, I mean, for example, Tom, I think you moved here from California, correct? And, was it Ohio, sorry. But it was 2021?
California at one point, but
2021? What year? Okay. And for example, like, what attracted you to Marvin? Like, I mean, and you don't have to answer it unless you want to, but like, I'm just saying, I think that's something that's important to think about because we do have, as this discussion kind of started, we're looking at, you've got these legacy rural type subdivisions, and you have this newer, last 20 years, suburban type subdivisions. And I think it attracts different people. I think you have certain people that do want the acreage, the trees, the land, but you also have people that moved here, maybe if it's because of the taxes, the schools, or something else. And I think that also kind of creates that diverse kind of vision that, which just, once again, still makes Marvin unique, but I think that's kind of an important question to ask because it's different for everyone.
I think that's a perfect question to ask folks is why did you move here? Because that'll give you an indication of where they're going, especially for the folks that have been here for a relatively short period of time. John, on the other hand, probably has a different perspective.
I don't think he heard you.
Yeah.
I also think you're,
Question, I'm sorry.
oh, Bob.
The question I'd like it to be asked, and I'm going to ask this for a selfish reason. When I look at Marvin, I look at it as a quilt. As we look at different communities, they all have their separate charm, each of the subdivisions. And I remember the former mayor saying, and this is where people come to go to sleep. They come here for sanctuary, which is what Bob Nunnenkamp was saying. They come here for sanctuary, and they leave what is a peaceful place to the hustle and bustle of Mecklenburg County, and getting on the highways and byways and all the crazy to try to get to their living. The living has come to us where sometimes now it's sad. I've been here for now 13 years, and we have developed nothing but highways between the patchwork quilt. Marvin Road, Newtown Road, Marvin School Road, and it seems like you jump on the highway from your sanctuary, and now you hear, especially the people that live closer, especially going from Mecklenburg County down Marvin Road to Newtown Road, you hear and you feel like you're living on the Indy 500. What I would like asked is, my goal has always been in my position is to literally, and I joked about this, to put a toll booth right on the Mecklenburg County border and stop traffic from coming through us, and Union County, Waxhaw is not stopping. So people are using us as that cut through. I'd like you to ask, what do you think over at Joe Carr Road and Marvin Road, if we were to put a traffic light there and stop people, even just momentarily, and allow people to enjoy the community by being able to turn out left and right from their patchwork community? In other words, maybe put that element of, yes, sanctuary, canopy trees, I'm all about that, but now it's all been interrupted and won't stop with traffic. So how does traffic fit into the sanctuary? How do you feel about, specifically, for a moment in time, stopping folks from coming through as opposed to, having roundabouts and such that just speed people through? It just makes cars flow. What do we do to maybe keep the sanctuary? In other words, for a moment in time, let people be able to get in and out of their communities, out of their patchworks. That's all. Something to that nature, maybe.
I wish we had more control over our roads than having to abide by whatever NCDOT says. But I think, the more walkable our community is, so the more connected the neighborhoods are, which is, I know, something that the trails are going to be focusing on, and it's feedback you guys have already received. The more traffic calming we can do, so the more connected things are by sidewalks, the more, walkways across roads. I mean, I know how many people have been to downtown Waxhaw, and they have, no, I'm not saying this because I think it's kind of crazy, but like they have the little flags, and when they're ready to walk across the street, they like wave their little flag to get traffic to stop. But that's kind of inefficient, but it's the idea of it, right? The more walkable we are, the more traffic will have to slow down. If we do it correctly, there won't be accidents, but people are still people. But I will say, you're gonna see the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. So the people, like if I wasn't on the planning board, I probably would not even be able to make it to this meeting because I work in Mecklenburg County. So like getting back out here, or even like pausing your life for 5 minutes to know what's going on in your community is really difficult. So you're gonna hear a lot of polar opinions tomorrow. And I think that one of the challenges for us on the planning board has been educating people that there needs to be a balance. We cannot have it one way or the other. There must be a balance. I am the rural cheerleader, but you have to give sometimes so that you can preserve the other bits. So educating all Marvin residents on what we can and cannot do, what can we preserve, what we can't preserve, what we have no control over. There's a lot of things that the state has control over, NCDOT. We don't have any, people blame us for it. I'm like, we don't have any control over that. Like, we can't do anything about that. What can we control? What can we do? What best practices can we put into place to balance homeowner rights or landowner rights and Marvin, preservation? But you're gonna hear some very polar stuff. So like thinking through just how do you make this side and this side come together and meet in the middle, because that's where the majority of people probably will lie, is in the middle. So, good luck.
Well, and that,
It's not an easy.
and I know we want to move on to the next item on the agenda, but I do think that gets to the second bullet that you see there about like, some of that feedback is going to vary depending on how long they've been here and where they live in the village, which I think for some people is hard to rectify because Marvin's not a very big place. But we anticipate, yeah. Yep, that's right. So real quick before we move on, tomorrow's workshop, April 7th, the board meeting for the PRG. We do have the working group. We're tentatively scheduled to meet with them in April. And then at the end of April, the intent is to come back at a second workshop. And that's where most of the recommendations will be laid out and we'll collect some input. And then if all goes well, we should be back here in the summer timeframe to have an adopted plan. It's quick. Yeah, well, thank you all for your time this evening, and you'll see more of us. You can leave.
All right, tree buffers and regulations.
It's late.
Okay. So ideally, this kind of worked out perfect that we had our joint meeting tonight, because I know Planning Board, we've been kind of going over Article 11 and some potential updates, and Council also had some questions and recommendations on that, and myself and Angel and Mayor Barbara met with Keith O'Haron last week, I believe it was last week, Keith O'Haron's the Union County Urban Forest, and kind of talked about our tree ordinance. And so the goal of this discussion is kind of like, one, let's talk about some of the things that kind of we just were in regards to tree preservation, what our ordinance says, what we can and can't do, as well as then kind of my goal is to take all this feedback while you guys both are here, and craft some recommendations to amend Article 11. Real quick to kind of summarize, like once again, like so Article 11 is our tree and landscape article in the MDO. We already do have pretty good regulations, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong. I think they can be better. I think things can always be better. And so I've already started kind of crafting some additional changes, i.e. to tree mitigation, to certain protections for heritage and specimen trees, depending on size. But ultimately, the biggest thing that I want to make sure we're aware of is that really any new development is going to go through the conditional rezoning process, which that's where you can really kind of fine tune this per property. Meaning like, you know, if we just talked about how some subdivisions, when they were developed in Marvin, was an old farm track and had no trees on them, and a few were fully wooded and had trees taken down. That's where I think we can, like, through that conditional zoning process, that site-specific plan, really kind of hash some of that out at that time, but we can still put protections in our ordinance to go ahead and put that expectation there. One of the questions, and I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off to an extent, is we talked about clear cutting. Keith basically said you can't stop it. It's basically the development is that, like what our ordinance says now is you have to, based off the acreage of the development, there's a certain percentage of trees you have to preserve on the property. However, and what it says is, then it kind of goes to an outline, it says the first area that should be preserved is about a 25-foot preservation strip kind of around the exterior of the development, as well as then if that still does not meet the required percentage of land to be preserved, then they would focus on then areas of internal tree preservation as well. So I know that's been a hot topic. The reason I bring that up is because we can't really say you can't clear cut a lot, but we can say if you do cut down trees, or if that tree is a large white oak in good condition, and we have to define that per the ordinance if it's 36 inches in diameter or higher, then we can, in a way, potentially try to preserve that tree or require it to be protected. Once again, if a developer fights that, then we make them pay a fee in lieu or a hefty mitigation. But if it doesn't meet that and they remove trees, then we basically have a mitigation for how many trees are removed, they have to plant X amount back. Does that make sense? Let's discuss.
Well, one thing that was really interesting that I learned out of that meeting was that one of the biggest beefs that Keith has is a lot of times these developers will come in and they'll take all the good topsoil and they'll sell it. And what's left is clay and slate and stuff that they build the houses on, but then they don't bring the topsoil back so that things can actually grow when they get to the landscaping part of their, the deal with these houses. And so I think one of the things that we should do is look at making sure that when we have developers come in, that it's a requirement that, no, you don't get to sell that topsoil, you just need to put it over here and then bring it back out 8 to 12 inches back out so that things will grow. Again, if you have to cut something down.
How can you legislate something that they own?
I'll show you. We actually technically already have this, that's the wrong thing. We technically already have what Angel is talking about in our ordinance. Now, can it be clearer? Yes. And that's one thing that we would, that's already part of like some of my proposed changes. Give me one sec to get it pulled up here for you guys. Let's see. Okay, so this is under just like planning techniques, which is a part of our legislation. It's in Article 11. But you see it says that the entire landscape yard must be basically organic amendments tilled to a depth of 8 to 12 inches. Talks about backfill with the original soil and no other soil amendments. So essentially, though, we would take what's already here and kind of further clarify that. It's also something we can specifically kind of reference in probably like Article 16, our subdivision ordinance, as well as, you know, internally for staff, like we can make these notes and specific conditions as part of, once again, those conditional zoning approvals. And once again, Rick said this, I'll say this, like, you want your ordinances to be somewhat flexible, but at the same time, we don't want them to be too flexible. And so we'd probably still have to have some type of stipulation in here depending on, I don't know, condition of the existing topsoil, I don't know, I'm just hypothetically talking right now. But ultimately, the goal would be to exactly what Angel was saying, is that if a development is approved and part of their landscaping plans, they have to backfill once they do the grading and all that stuff with the original topsoil of the property, because it's got the nutrients and stuff for the trees to survive.
So they can still sell the topsoil on the infrastructure portion that they tear out, is what you're saying?
Not necessarily.
But they could.
Well, I mean, that's one thing we can potentially clarify. And once again, it all depends on the property, right? Like, certain properties, depending on the grading of, like, the grading for development, putting in the roads and infrastructure, they have to then use some of that soil that they scraped off here to backfill a lot to get the grade right on that lot per their approved plan. So what we really don't want is necessarily them bringing in soil overall, just, I mean, in general, and utilizing, once again, the existing grade / existing soil on the property to the best of its ability. But ultimately, like I said, once the development's scraped down to the red clay, they grade the lot, build the house pad, and then put turf down. And it's just, and it's not the healthiest environment for a tree.
Hunter, can we be prescriptive enough to tell a developer that he's going to save the topsoil and not sell it? Can we just lay it out in our ordinances? That's not.
That is what I'm going to propose. Like I said, we already kind of have it in this section here. I will,
No offense, but I don't want to kind of have it.
yeah.
To Bob's point, I think what we're saying here, it says soil preparation for the entire landscape yard. Change that from the entire landscape yard to the entire
Disturbed area.
Yeah, so then that has to stay.
Yeah.
I like where you're going there.
So,
I just don't want the developer to have too much flexibility in interpretation of an ordinance.
and that's where, once again,
Just have to put it back in the tree.
that's where, once again, conditional zoning plays key into a lot of this. I will have to check legally if we can specifically put that in the ordinance. I don't see why we couldn't. If we can't, then yeah, we kind of still put those parameters in the ordinance, make that a specific condition of a conditional zoning. It has to be mutually agreed upon, but still, if they don't agree to it, don't approve it. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. And that's where we do have power with that conditional zoning, because most of the time they're gonna probably agree to certain of those conditions, especially if we already have it outlined in our ordinance.
Is there, so this is, because I don't have to deal with the budget. So the more restrictive you are in some of these areas, do you have the staff to actually regulate and police?
This is a yes and no answer. Yes, because this would be a part of their construction documents. It would be identified in their construction documents as part of, in their notes, conditions, in their landscape plan, as well as their grading plan. So that would be reviewed from compliance. Those are signed, sealed, and then when they're in the field, that's what they're doing.
What about the individual lot owner who buys 3 acres and?
That's where we have to maybe get creative in the language. And this still gets back to that whole private property rights versus development. This ordinance applies to land development. Land development is defined as anywhere of you putting in a pool to building a full-blown subdivision. So if it's tied to a development permit, a zoning permit for a pool, a detached garage, a new house, yes. But if a property owner, that's where it's like, if a property owner just wants to cut down trees, like I said, that's still Keith even said it, like we can do it, we can try to, but we don't necessarily have the special legislation by the state. That's where then it does get into probably more staff time on policing and certain elements of that way.
So, because you know what I'm going to say. And I noticed that when I was reading the Article 11, like 11.1, and it talks about the benefits of the tree, preservation of the canopy. What's not in here is also, I mean, there is, I guess it mentions like glare from vehicle headlights, but from neighbor to neighbor, good tree preservation also reduces light pollution spilling, and especially from, you've got one neighborhood that doesn't have lights because that's what they choose, and the people behind them, all of a sudden, they've got like a friggin' lighthouse going on. So, and then also just buffering, because I know like we had issues with people tearing down all the trees and then putting them back in the front and not in the back, and now we can see into their home now. So I think it's not just about tree canopy, it's also about it's preserving the tree canopy, but also what is the screening and the buffering in between, so that we actually preserve people's way of life and how they chose to develop their own property.
And so, and that's, like I said, that's what gets tough, is that so you have like your buffering screening in here. You can't retroactively go force somebody to have a buffer. And I know like your experience, like that's, all those permits were pulled under the old ordinance, and they complied with the
But I can try
old
and help it
requirements.
keep it from happening to somebody else.
With
so.
that being said, so there's different ways. So you have your buffer types and buffer yards depending on development district and all that. I'm trying to think of ways. So one thing that we also see occur is you have your private property, developer may preserve 10 trees on the lot. And then homeowner comes in, wants to put in a pool, cuts down said 10 trees, and puts up evergreen screening, and you lose that canopy that was originally preserved as part of their tree preservation for the subdivision. Looking at potentially trying to do buffer yards on individual, I want to say individual private property, like a 5-foot or 10-foot kind of planting area, where if a development has to mitigate trees, when they're mitigating them on that individual lot, they plant in that buffer area that's on the individual lot but has to remain there. It's a buffer. It's a permanent tree preservation strip type thing. And it's a part of the subdivision approval. It's on the plat and everything in that sense. Retroactively, you could still then kind of amend some of this language to also say, once again, if you're putting in a pool, you're triggering the development permit. If you're an SFR and you're buffering, I mean, this would probably just be buffer type C if I had to guess. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
So what?
My person has a pool. I don't see any buffer around their pool.
All this was under the old ordinance.
No, but I mean, even when we used to approve pools, there was always a buffer around pools.
I would have to go back on that.
Huh.
Once again, that's kind of the other thing too, is you have different ordinances at different times. Like, we're going off of what we can enforce today. If the permit was pulled under the old ordinance, it said landscape and screening required, but if there's existing vegetation on the site, that's all it says. You don't, and that's one thing, you don't really get into landscape and screening regarding, said it's not as clear. Old ordinance said pools, you had to have X, Y, and Z. This one, once again, it's just kind of generalizing development as a whole.
Well, is there not a way to add in something to the ordinance that says that if you're a new development or you're a new build going into, backing up to an existing neighborhood, that there has to be some kind of a buffer so that your neighbors can't see you naked in the shower?
That's what this, I mean, this is what this is.
Please.
This is exactly what this is. This is what your buffer matrix is for.
You know?
I'm just saying, like, this is where you have your buffer type A, B, and C, and D, which A is your 40-foot buffer, so it's gonna be your least intensive uses that back up to your high-intensity uses, all the way down to buffer type D, which is your 5-foot in average width, which is your least intense uses that buffer up to your least intensive uses.
Yeah, but remember how we were just talking about, like, even with like the Jones home, so they took down all the interior trees to their current build. And it makes some of my neighbors literally cry. But being able to have, and the no-cut buffer sounded like a really great idea at the time, because it's like, no-cut tree buffer, that's fantastic. And then in reality, you can still see right through it all. Like, it doesn't actually provide any screening, and so now we're looking at the back of houses, which is not regulated. We could be looking at junky yards and,
That's where, in my opinion,
my house is like that.
there is a difference between tree preservation and screening.
And screening, so I think it has to be both and. I think especially when you've got either new developments or new builds backing up or touching residential, or even just residential period, that existing residential, like you need to be a good neighbor. And I will say, fences don't make good neighbors, but good buffering makes great neighbors, Angel. It
But see,
really
and that's
does.
like,
I don't wanna
so there's take the neighborhood that's across the street that's not in Marvin. You can do a lot in a berm and evergreen screening and shrubbery than actually preserving just 100 feet of trees. You're trying to achieve, the 100-foot preservation, yes, is trying to achieve screening elements of it, but it's also more importantly preserving trees. Because you canopy tree, you don't, unless you have that undergrowth and all that other stuff, like you're still gonna have, especially during wintertime, you're still gonna have where you see through. Compared to like a berm and a screen, you have a 4 to 8 foot tall berm, anywhere from 10 to 15, 20 feet tall, evergreen trees, shrubs, and all that stuff. Then you're actually screening the view from the adjacent
Get it.
uses.
You could be screening, if you prefer screening, you could be doing it at the detriment of preserving the tree canopy. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily, I'm just saying it's gonna depend on once again, every property is
Every
different.
property is different, right? I'm just, my point is that
Like,
we need to figure it out, because especially if we want to preserve small-town feel and what Marvin is, as these individual 3, 4, 5, 6 acre lots along all our major thoroughfares, as they start getting built up or bought up by developers and one house becomes 5 with a miniature, minor development, that is going to happen just time and time, this is what we're gonna start seeing. Once the big plots of land are gone, it's these little infill lots that are going to basically become the next targets, and that is what's gonna change Marvin even more, and I would say definitely at a detriment to, we're not gonna have that sanctuary anymore, because those will be the next thing to go.
Well, and that's why I personally like, so in the old ordinance, you had that view shed buffer. The view shed buffer that said every proposed subdivision that was along a major thoroughfare, and we had them defined as pretty much our main roads, had to have a minimum of an 85-foot view shed buffer up to a 285-foot view shed buffer, depending on the amount of road frontage. But do you remember all that language? Yeah. Broadmoor. Not a single tree, but has a 285-foot view shed. Is it viewing or shedding the view? That's kind of what I'm trying, like, we
Yeah.
preserved land because of the way the ordinance was written, which makes sense for maybe some of the other developments that did occur. But that's, once again, that one was approved in 2017. However, it's not really achieving a screening element compared to other developments. So, and that's what I'm trying to, like I said, what are we, tree preservation I know is a priority and that, but it's also, like I said, I'm trying to find ways then to blend it all together to make sense and still achieve some of these goals, but it may just be at a sacrifice of certain things.
Well, what if we still went with like percentage? So like when we were talking a couple weeks ago about if you've got an individual lot, let's say you got a 3-acre parcel and you're gonna cut down, or you're gonna build, 3 large home and like different outbuildings, right? As long as but if you're taking up like 70% of the existing land with buildings, like doing that percentage of, so like, same with like the building footprint, if we look at on a percentage as a whole, if we move that same, approach to tree preservation. So if we're looking at Broadmoor, and there really are no trees, they have to maintain X amount of trees, well, that means 5, and then maybe they can add some buffering, or like we can reduce the view shed buffer if they plant some natural trees where there were no trees before. Like I think having that flexibility, in the zoning does actually allow us to get a better product and get more privacy for existing homeowners. But if it's too restrictive, it doesn't always work across the board. But then you also, so having some flexibility there. I think that's one of the reasons we did this type A, type B, type C, so that we kind of look at, especially it doesn't work for individual lot owners, but if you're doing a development, you can kind of choose which one to pair.
Well, and the percentage thing, so that's kind of how Weddington is written with their trees. It says something, and once again, I'm not looking directly at it, but they have stipulations in there, if it's a certain acreage and then has certain percentage of existing canopy, then that then in turn relays how much has to be preserved. So there are potential ways yet to do that. And like I said, like I've already kind of got some of that being drafted as part of the research and stuff to bring back to planning board in March. So that's definitely one element of it. And like I said, I'm gonna keep falling back on the conditional zoning aspect of this. Like any new subdivision outside of if it's a rural residential subdivision on large 2.5-acre lots is gonna have to go through this process. So, I mean, that's where, to your point, and especially what I've seen, even with, with recent developments here in Marvin, you hear some of these concerns from adjoining property owners and residents, and that's how then developers or, applicants go above and beyond what the standard says, and that becomes a specific condition to that development. It gets into the, Bob had a great point as we were discussing one of these upcoming rezonings of even going ahead and tying down specific species as part of mitigation, and trying to lock in some of that elements as part of, these conditional rezoning approvals or just processes. So it's definitely still like where that does give you that chance to look at it from a case by case. There's ways that we can even, as part of the conditional rezoning process, require a tree survey, which we kind of do. Basically, I know we do for the construction documents, but we can kind of start requiring that. It's 4 inches in diameter and higher, which is you're starting at your understory trees. I don't know if that's, I'm not gonna say feasible, but practical for a conditional rezoning, but you could go up to 12, 18 inches, something that's actually looking to preserve the higher quality type canopy as part of that initial tree survey to be included with the rezoning application. So there's definitely ways that we can try to get some of this information up front, look at it by case, but as well as then still get language into the ordinance to make it flexible to that extent.
Because, I mean, and I do think it needs to also, I know a lot of what we do is based on developments, but we don't have that many parcels of land to develop anymore. So it's these individual, like in our neighborhood, a lot of homes are getting knocked down and bigger homes are getting built up, which is just part of the, I don't know, transition, I guess you could say. But also having a lot of these things apply to new builds or rebuilds. Is there a way to, and maybe this is just the function of the land use plan, it's how I would have said it before, but making some statements like, Marvin is about tree preservation using native species and, either removing or not allowing, what are the invasive species. But also, we want good neighbors and we want buffers between. So if you're making a new build and you're removing part of the buffer, here are 3 options that you could do to put up more screening, or you know what I mean? So it's like there are options that they could use that get kicked in depending on the type of land. So if a berm makes sense, then great, go with the berm option. If screening and tree canopy preservation, but just so it's here are the guidelines, this is what we want. We want neighbors to still like each other when you're done with your build, to preserve each other's, the reasons that we came out here. And same with development as well. And then, is that the land use plan? Is that, or could that be statements that are just in the headings of?
You kind of have, you have some of that already outlined here in the purpose statements for this article. These purpose statements are basically trying to once again, what are these ordinances saying, or what are they trying to achieve? And then it's something that staff, planning board, council can always fall back on if you're reading an ordinance that's in the gray and open for interpretation, what is once again, the overall article trying to achieve? And so, I'm pretty sure we have some about the invasive species and stuff already in here.
It's in there. It's in there.
But that's that. But yeah, you further can build on this as part of the comprehensive plan in the ways that, yes, making it goals and recommendations that if a new development is being proposed, that certain tree protections are, I'm just, like I said, being very general in these statements, but you kind of can put those goals and recommendations in there as part of the plan. And once again, when a rezoning comes up, you weigh, is this proposed rezoning plan consistent with the comprehensive plan? Are they meeting those goals and recommendations of existing tree canopy protection, buffering between, existing uses? What are those existing uses, and so on? So,
Buffering and screening?
yeah, like I said, they go hand in hand, but like I said, I do think they try to achieve different goals when it comes to buffering and screening.
Could we also add light pollution in there? Because I don't see light pollution in it, and besides light pollution being annoying to people who don't have streetlights, it's also very bad for birds, for migrating animals. I mean, we've got so many little critters that run around on our properties. And if you don't, I have a whole photo album in my phone, so you're welcome to see what they look like when they run around. But I don't know. I'm sure you have deer in Firethorn. Do you have turkeys and fox and
I'm not seeing a turkey.
opossums? Opossum, you got it. It's an O. They're nice little. Yeah, they like candy canes if you need to trap them. Yep, baby, let me tell you. But light pollution is something that I know Park and Recs, they are also very passionate about. And if anyone needs to see what bad effects it has, you're welcome to come to my house. Just give me some time, I'll clean up before. before you come over. I'll pull my weeds, Angel, I'll pull my weeds.
So, like I said, ultimately, I think we're all kind of on the same page, and I know, once again, we kind of talked about this planning board, but I wanted to open it. Is there any specific questions that council, or, has about, like, what our current regulations say, or is there any feedback from the council that we all want to discuss together on this?
Come on, don't give us crickets.
Preserving the wild, and we've talked about this, right? And that's one of the things I like about the kind of cluster developments where you're less, like Weddington Chase, right? We're all less than an acre because we have like hundreds of acres of just woods you can't cut down that are just HOA woods, right? And I think when those properties abut other properties like that is when you get turkeys and coyotes and all those habitats, right? And I think that's what really gives a rural feel. Like, we first moved down here and I saw an armadillo and I had no idea that those were in North Carolina. We had to Google it and I'm like, to me, this is a Southwest thing. Like, what?
I've never seen one
I've
either,
never
but I
seen
see
one.
Common in
them
North
in
Carolina.
Austin all the time, so.
That's what I would expect to see one, but apparently they are not so much here, but they are common in North Carolina. So that was a kind of cool thing. So I think just being mindful of trying to preserve as much wild land.
And that's one thing that Keith said, it's a whole lot easier to protect land, and that we can do that through open space requirements or stuff than, I said, kind of getting it. And like, that's why the NDO, if you recall, Rick, they all go hand in hand to create what type of product we want. But there's, we're specifically looking at Article 11, but there's other elements like our open space requirements and such that can also be built upon to preserve the land aspect of that. And make it, like I said, at the end of the day, a high quality type product of whatever development's being proposed.
I think we need to have really stiff penalties for cutting down heritage canopy trees that are huge, 36
If they're
inch.
not approved,
Yeah,
because sometimes you can't avoid it.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but sometimes you can't avoid it.
And like I said, we have, I know, Angel, we talked about it, like, we have that stipulation already in our ordinance, but we can definitely go up on the fines. Once again, this would apply to development, but when you're talking about the heritage tree, that's where it gives us, we're gonna incorporate language in, like, once again, we'll define what that means. If the proposed development has X amount, like, let's just say they have a lot that's being proposed, and there's a few heritage trees on specific lots, and we want them to be preserved, like, yeah, it's maybe hard to say, like, you have to, but at the same time, that's where a fee in lieu, heftier mitigation, a fine, certain elements of that, where we're really trying to strong arm them to preserving those quality heritage hardwoods that are native to the area. But once again, it's still in a way, and Keith kind of said this, is like the flexibility that the developer still can potentially cut it down, but we can just make it, once again, hard to do so.
or expensive.
Hunter, I think too, you have to look at the reality of saving it too, because if we take Village Hall Park, for example, we did have a heritage that we had to cut down because it was not healthy.
Correct.
So,
No, I think that's very important as well, is because in a lot of these developments, once again, you see a fully wooded lot, but does everybody know the condition of those trees? That tree survey shows that for when staff's doing their review. But that's another thing to kind of factor in. And Keith and I have done site walks for certain subdivisions and stuff, and really tried to identify if it's in healthy condition, and if it's preserved or is to be preserved during a development, like we have it outlined in our ordinance that you have to put a tree protection fence around the critical root zone and that it can't be disturbed, and then that's where those fines come into play. If that tree dies or is removed and wasn't a part of that plan to be removed, then here's what you gotta do to mitigate that. Heftier than what you have to do to mitigate if you already removed trees as part of that approved plan.
We used to own acreage in a community called the Sanctuary out at Lake Wiley, like, years ago, and they had it was created as a nature preserve, but you could also have like estate homes, so you could have like an artist, talking ridiculous, you've got multiple buildings and stuff, but in-law buildings and things, but it was like the concrete needed to be pervious, and there was like a pervious kind of, I don't even know what it was called, but, or impervious, no, pervious. Is that correct? Where it would drain through to the soil? Yeah. Pervious. So they had very kind of strict ways that you could build, you could build multiple buildings, but you had to respect nature and preserve nature on your acreage. So I don't know, it was a, started with a C, they're a huge developer. I'll think of it, but you could maybe even look at some of their language, the way that they wrote it in, because if you owned a lot in there, you had to abide by their rules, which was why we wanted to own land in there.
Hunter, one of the things we talked about last month was the individual owners that can kind of do we want our, I know you said you were going to put some thought into that, and
That's a great point of conversation for this. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, as kind of mentioned, we talked about that with Keith. That does add an extra level of regulations when it comes down to regulating it on individual private property and not tied to development. It requires extra staff time. We were kind of doing that under the way that old Chapter 93 was written. A majority of the residents still, like I said, will inquire about having a tree removed if it's, even if it's dead, they still reach out to me to make sure that they can. But if there is it's a gray area from a legal standpoint, as we don't have that special authorization from the state. Municipality hasn't gotten that special authorization since 2006. But at the end of the day, I mean, we can still draft language in that if we want to have those protections. It's a fine line. I mean, don't get me wrong. But that's where it's like, I feel like there's ways, especially in newer developments or potentially newer developments specifically when it's not, when that property is now private property and not being tied to, like I said, a pool or something like that, where if you have maybe those platted buffers or tree preservation strips type things on those individual lots, you can regulate it that way. It still gets into those existing subdivisions that don't have that.
I only bring it up because what I'm starting to see, I've been traveling for 3 weeks, and I came home to a lot of mail, and in that is, and you know my area, I only have 4 homes. There are 20 letters of offering to sell, asking to buy our home, those 4 homes. So
That's the,
Pictures in the mail.
Yeah.
It's like crazy, it's crazy.
that's what I told you guys the trend's gonna be. I mean, like literally, and that's part of the reason why the comp plan's important, is that infill development in some of these larger lots. I mean, especially kind of in your subdivision person. I mean, I know it's somewhat of a subdivision. You're gonna have people that's interested, especially with certain neighborhoods that have that older housing stock. They're gonna make offers.
Yeah.
Now, once again,
We
we
don't
have
wanna
we
have
have
it-
zoning that kind of, once again, protects that now with the rural residential district, but don't be surprised if that trend happens, where you start seeing rezoning applications on 2 or 3 older home sites that are 4 to 5 acres in size, and it's 10, 15 acres combined all together, and they want to knock down the 3 homes and put 30 homes on it.
Yes.
Not saying we're going to approve it. Probably wouldn't get approved. I'm just saying, like, that's going to happen.
Okay.
Oh, good times.
Any other?
I don't know. I would like to just say that because we serve at your pleasure, which sounds very weird as we're sitting next to you. We serve at your pleasure, Angel. I would say what I love about this planning board is that it is a variety of backgrounds, opinions. I run a nonprofit, and you're in development, right? So everyone's history and experience and specialties come from all over, but that's also what makes us a unique board. It makes it feels representative of Marvin itself. And I know that you guys are considering making changes and everything, but please do consider that the more varied the voices are on the planning board, because we are just a what's the term that we use?
Advisory.
An advisory board. We don't actually get a true vote. We will do everything we can to dig into whatever's coming across our desks so that you guys feel more prepared when you make your own vote and decision, which is lasting. But please, do consider that the more variety and experiences and voices on the planning board, the better product you're going to get when it comes across your desks or whatever you would call. My words are failing me because it's like 500 degrees in here, so I'm very hot. So
We don't have desks.
But please do consider that.
Kelly, to follow up on that, can you explain to us why you did not reappoint Mr. Marino?
Well, I think there was a variety of reasons. It wasn't necessarily that we didn't reappoint him. The appointments aren't lifetime appointments. It's not the Supreme Court. We had two very qualified candidates who we felt, were, to Kelly's point, added the variety and the diversity that we needed to the board.
I mean, are you familiar with the Marvin Development Ordinance Project?
Which point?
Point is,
I'm not, what is that?
that's what we spent 6 months learning.
I was
The
like,
MDO.
Yes.
Marvin, I was like,
The
what is
MDO.
this?
Yeah.
Some sort
So
of
So
underground?
the village spent $100,000 on this project. We were all schooled on it, and now the only attorney on the planning board, who we all leaned on, is now gone. I mean, is your intention to replace everybody on the planning board with people that, did you promise positions when you were running for office?
No, not at all.
I mean, it makes no sense why you would not reappoint Mr. Marino. I mean, these are voluntary boards. It takes.
This
we have
really
talked
isn't
about this.
the forum for that.
We talked about this. It takes a year, at least a year, to get the planning board under your feet. The language, the learning, and everything like that. And it seems like you just threw that away. You didn't take that into consideration at all. You came in, put somebody who you wanted to put in, didn't take into the years of service.
Have you
years
looked
of
at the
volunteer.
qualifications of the people who were approved?
I mean, if I.
Have you looked? Have you looked at Chris Day's resume?
Have I looked at it? Has he served on the planning board?
Have you
for
looked at his
3 years?
resume?
Has he served on the
We
planning board?
actually don't get to see those. We don't even know, I didn't even know, actually, that.
But I mean, if that's your point, I mean, if you guys want to have. a
This
clean
isn't
sweep-
the forum. It's not on the agenda.
I would like to chime in real quick on this because I was in that interview process with Councilman Eck as well as Nunnenkamp. Everyone got a fair shot at the interviews. The other two folks that were just recently appointed had just outstanding resumes and very, very extensive experience in planning large projects. Ken came into the interview and very nice. He's had a history, I guess, on this board, but we asked him what his vision was for the village and he didn't have one. So I personally struggled with that and, you know, that matters. So I appreciate the service that he did. I really do. And we vetted everybody. We didn't just go in and appoint and put the screws to people. We really wanted to give everybody a chance. I can tell you, if the guys with the really awesome resumes tanked in the interview, they wouldn't have gotten it. I mean, this was based on how people actually performed with the questions and the answers, their demeanor, their disposition, and their passion. And there was a consensus that the passion wasn't there, the vision wasn't there. We wanted to take, you know, a different angle. And by the way, no one is pulling rank here, but it's our decision who we want to pick. That's what happens whenever a local administration changes. And we've all dealt with it in our lives. And right now it's happening now. And hopefully we made the right choices on this. And these guys perform and they basically outperform. But it was a fair and open process and everyone got a shot that wanted to be a part of it.
Can
And
we
I
go
also
back to the
encourage-
tree ordinance real quick? Seriously. My question, Hunter, is when we're talking about native trees, and I don't want to think of it as exclusive because I want to go back to Kelly's point in terms of tree buffering. If you look at the trees that work, you know, you got the cypress, you got the Leland, you got the spruce and the arborvitae. Those are your three primary trees that will screen and buffer.
They're not, I definitely know that Leland's not native,
No, they're not. That's what my point
and they
is.
die, so like.
Well,
they-
no, but that's not my point. My point, let me just, if it's okay to finish. My point is that if we do exclusive native, we eliminate trees that may serve the purpose that you brought up. And I'm not selling arborvitaes, and I'm not selling,
Are you a tree seller?
I'm not buying or selling. I'm just saying as we structure the ordinance, can we be specific to address Kelly's point, but at the same time focus on native trees? And the thing that disturbs me, and God, Joe, I'm picking on your neighborhood right now, but the developer that put in Bridle Path, they put in what's called lace leaf elms. And lace leaf elms are just in the same league as a Bradford pear.
Oh, in the same league as what?
A Bradford pear. They serve no utility whatsoever. They don't provide a food source. They don't provide a nesting habitat. They don't do anything. So I'm just happy to see the work you're putting in. I appreciate the work you're putting in. And as we get the ordinance finalized, I just would like to address Kelly's point with the buffering. That's my only point.
Yeah, regarding species, so one thing we did do in Article, and just for clarification, one thing we did do in Article 11, and this was, per Keith and I's discussion, is old Chapter 93 had the species list as part of the ordinance. The issue with that is every time you want to update your species list, you have to amend your ordinance. So it's got to go through a public hearing and adopt an ordinance. So now what the ordinance says is it just says species used required in planting yards and parking lots shall be of local adapted nature. Other species may be approved by the planning and zoning and subdivision administrator. And it says, see the Village of Marvin Technical Standards and Specifications Manual for recommended, not recommended, and or prohibited species. So we've now made it administrative document, and I basically rely on Keith and his the county's list. But that's one way we can do it, because once again, to your point, certain species get certain diseases over time, and aren't as suitable. And like I said, and that's the other thing too, Keith also reviews all these construction documents, and I get feedback from his, on his species list regarding, if it's, even if the developer that's in development wants to substitute a species because whatever they had on the proposed landscape plans aren't available, I still run that by Keith. Pretty much anytime a tree is being planted, Keith knows about it, and Keith has given me the okay on what those species are.
Okay.
So,
I appreciate
but yeah, we're still other ways that we can
Okay, I
clarify
appreciate
that in the ordinance for sure.
They're not required to, but it is like strongly suggested, unless it's a conditional zoning. We can dictate conditional zoning landscaping, correct?
Yes. I can't, to my knowledge, I can't regulate if you as a property owner wants to put in species that are prohibited. We do have kind of language in there, like I said, that we could probably use as enforcement, but for the most part, any development, and mainly I'm referring to subdivision development, when they provide their construction documents and part of their landscape and tree mitigation plans, all that gets reviewed by myself in compliance with this article, as well as Keith reviews it. And I'm mainly looking at Keith specifically to give me recommendations on those proposed species.
Let me ask you a question. So I know bamboo is very invasive, right, once you plant it. Would we just say flat out, no, you can't plant bamboo because it'll now be all over your neighbor's yard within 3 years?
Are you referring to like an individual property owner doing it, or as part of it?
No, I'm just like, I just know bamboo is very invasive. So like, once you plant it, it's like, it's off to the races. So for instance, if someone wanted to plant some bamboo, what would we say? I'm using it as a hypothetical.
Right, and I'm. So one way, from a development standpoint, we would say no. I mean, if they propose like a bamboo screening buffer for whatever reason, it wouldn't get approved. If an individual property owner did it, like I said, there's ways through this ordinance, our nuisance ordinance, that we could probably enforce. For example, in not chapter 93, I'm blanking on our nuisance. 92 or 91, 90. 92, yeah. Either way, in our actual nuisance chapter in our code of ordinances, we have vegetation type restrictions. So if your neighbor planted bamboo, it invaded your property, became a nuisance per se, then yeah, it could be then handled from a code enforcement standpoint.
Same with light and sound.
Yes. Light's a tricky one.
We do it on the photo.
We do.
Yeah.
But the individual, and this came up with these, I mean, not to bring Village Hall, but like Village Hall just installed permanent lighting. That's treated different than an individual property owner putting that permanent lighting on their property. And it gets kind of, then once again, it gets tricky into, this is a civic building, this is, and a different use than individual residential property.
I just wish, it just would be great to have some sort of language around if this impedes your,
And like,
the nuisance to your neighbor, if it impedes your neighbors, you know.
and I've got lighting written down as something to kind of research and investigate further there.
Okay.
So. That's all I've got for trees. Are we good? I don't know what's going on. We good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and just to, conclude, I've been working on putting together this research. It'll all go back to planning board, but I just wanted to make sure I got a common vision before I start producing or recommending stuff. So we'll have that in the works, and that will be to planning board for their March meeting. Other than that, in planners update, or planners report.
Excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn. If I can
Okay.
get a motion to adjourn council so they can continue their meeting. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For planners report, the only item is, once again, community meeting, the community workshop for the comp plan tomorrow. And then the other thing, so we have received a rezoning application for the Scott Lett property. The applicant will be holding their neighborhood meeting here at Village Hall on February 25th. It's a Wednesday. I think I would have to clarify the times, but if you're a adjoining property owner within 1,300 feet of that property, you probably got a letter today from the applicant. But once again, that neighborhood meeting is the first step in the rezoning process. February 25th. It's a Wednesday. That is a applicant-driven meeting. It's a requirement per a conditional rezoning application. If you're interested in attending, let me know, but that rezoning application will probably maybe be on the March meeting for just an initial introduction. If not, April. Once again, baby on the way here. Also kind of plays into when these applications will come forth. If they are on the March meeting, it would basically just be a neighborhood type meeting where the applicant can present their application, their rezoning plans to the planning board, and planning board can ask questions and kind of go ahead and give initial feedback, but you guys wouldn't take any action until at least April or May.
What property was that for again?
The Lett property. Other than that, that's all I got.
All right, so the only action items we have really is if you can come tomorrow night, please do so.
Please let me know. Well, I guess I'm only talking, there's no planning board members online. Are any of y'all planning to go? I just need to know if I'm going to.
I'm going to try to be there. It just depends on,
Then I'm going to assume there's not going to be a quorum, so. no
there
notice.
probably won't be a quorum, yeah. And I don't think that Rich will be back tomorrow,
I
so,
can't imagine, so.
yeah. Okay.
I'm going to comments.
Bob, would you like to start us off on comments?
Unmute.
Yeah, just, okay, there I am. Yes, I enjoyed the meeting and especially the comprehensive plan. We'll see where it goes with that. And just for the record, because I was working remotely here in Connecticut, I didn't vote on the planning board members, so just so you know, wasn't allowed.
We don't allow remote voting anymore per council policy.
Got it. Got it. All right. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Good luck tomorrow, you guys. We'll try and be here and support. I'll try and be here to support, but
Good luck to you guys. I won't be here. I will be at a conference, so
Good luck to you.
is it like a government conference?
that's a clerk conference.
What?
Clerk.
Clerk, okay. You could be clerking it up.
It's outside of Wilmington.
Not
At
bad,
least it's not far.
not bad. Enjoy it as much as you can, yeah.
Mike?
I was gonna congratulate the new council if they had stuck around, but they did not. But congratulate to them. I wish them well, and I hope they do well.
Good to be back. Congratulations to the new council and wish them the best in their endeavors.
John?
I guess it was a learning experience for the new council. I was going back to our previous joint meetings. It was more,
There's more back and forth.
yeah,
We used to pepper with a lot of questions, I think.
direction from council, I guess, to us.
Do you think that's because this group is assuming where the council stands on things, or it's just so new that we just don't know, we don't understand personalities yet and know what we can ask and not ask, or?
I will, I mean, so some of the council, like I said, that's part of the reason why I had that Article 11 discussion on the agenda tonight, because when they got elected, they conveyed or had questions on our tree protections and had some recommendations or stuff they wanted staff to potentially look into, and that's kind of what, it was all kind of already in motion because of what we were doing with Chapter 93 for the public tree ordinance and stuff. So in a roundabout way, I mean, they come to staff with some of those recommendations or stuff that they would want staff then to bring to planning board to discuss further, and that's the only one I know that's not really on my radar. I mean, signs kind of came up actually this morning during our council meeting about looking at potentially revising some of our signage regulations. Once again, it was kind of conveyed, we have that protection in a way through our master signage plan per Article 17. And any of the recent commercial developments that have been approved, if it's, the two in the Heritage District or the Marvin Commons project, a specific condition of their approval was they have to submit and get a master signage plan approved for that development. So, which is basically then planning board and council becoming the DRB again and reviewing signage consistency. But other than that, I mean, yeah.
All right, well, with that, could I get a
You
mo?
didn't give any comments, did you?
I said, yeah, I did, kind of. I made some.
Move
Yeah. Yeah, Michael, do the honors. All in favor?
7:51.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, guys.